This is TEDxOshkosh TV, a complimentary extra to the annual TEDxOshkosh in-person event. In each episode of the show, we'll learn more about a past TEDxOshkosh speaker, how their talk idea is spread, and the change it has inspired.
Welcome to TEDxOshkosh TV. I'm Grace Lim, your host. Today we have Pete Dulcamara, a corporate futurist who gave a thought-provoking talk in 2021 on how we can help save the world by becoming billionaires. Yes, billionaires. Before we get to our guest, I'm going to show you a clip from his talk.
I hear people say all the time, we need to save the planet. And I always think to myself, save the planet? The planet's going to be just fine. 10,000 years, 100,000 years, 1,000,000 years from now, this will be a lush green planet teeming with life. So it's not really a question about saving the planet. It's about saving our species by saving the planet.
So Pete, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you. It's great to be here.
And so in your talk, you sort of dismissed this charge that we all hear, you got to save the world. So what did you mean by that? I mean, and tell us some of the highlights of your talk.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so we always hear people say we got to save the planet, got to save the planet. Well, the planet's been here for 4.5 billion years. And it's going to be here for another 5 billion years until the sun runs out of energy. And if that was a 24-hour clock, humans have only been here for 4 seconds. We got here 200,000 years ago. Industrial Revolution started 200 years ago, which is like 4 milliseconds ago. So when we think about the impact that we're having as humans, it's huge. But the question is not so much about saving the planet. 50,000 years from now, this is going to be a lush green planet teeming with life. The only question is whether humans will be here to enjoy it. And so it's really our time to make sure that we protect the planet. We've entered what's called the Anthropocene, which is the time where humans are having a greater impact on the Earth than the Earth's ability to recover. And so, in nature, extinction is the rule, survival is the exception. And if we don't want to go extinct, if we want to survive as a species, we need to preserve the world. We need to preserve the Earth so that we can survive as a species. So it's really about saving the species by saving the planet.
Okay, all right, saving the species, saving humans and other living organisms.
I called it humanity-centric innovation, not Earth-centric innovation or planet-centric innovation. It's really about saving our species, because the planet's going to be here, and it's going to be teeming with life. It's just a question. The Earth existed for 4.5 billion years before humans showed up, and so the real question, Elon Musk is talking about interplanetary species. He wants to create a colony on Mars as a lifeboat for humans when Earth is no longer viable. I keep thinking we've got a great fixer-upper right here on Earth. So how do we use humanity-centric innovation to solve the biggest problems facing humanity in an economically viable way so that we can preserve this wonderful home that we have, which is Earth?
Wow. Big ideas. Very big ideas. So let me ask you this. What made you decide to pitch this to TEDxOshkosh?
Yeah, so, I've really been thinking about this idea for humanity-centric innovation for a long time. I talk about in my talk, my personal mission is to help raise children that live a life fulfilled and help create businesses that improve people's lives. And this really was born, I can still remember when I graduated as a chemical engineer and went to the Gulf Coast. And I remember looking out at all the pipes and distillation columns as a chemical engineer thinking, wow, that's really beautiful. And then I went to this thing called Prince Charles Business and the Environment. Prince Charles holds this class at Cambridge University. And so I attended that in 1999. And I remember going to that exact same bridge and looking out at those pipes and thinking to myself, what a rape of the earth. We have to find a better way. Mother Nature spent 150 million years driving hydrocarbons deep down into our lithosphere. We humans have spent the last 150 years pulling those hydrocarbons up into our biosphere and burning them. There's got to be a better way. And so it was this whole idea of, rather than using hydrocarbons from petroleum, how do we use carbohydrates from plants? If you just look out your window, Mother Nature is taking sunlight, CO2, and water through photosynthesis to do carbon fixation to make complex carbohydrates. And not only could we use those for food for humans and feed for animals, which we do, but to use that for fuels and feedstocks for industry. And so it was really born out of that moment of creating my personal mission to create businesses that improve people's lives, that moment that I had at the Business and the Environment, and this idea that now is the time to use science and technology to improve the lives of every human being on Earth.
I understand your intentions.
Yeah.
But when you talk about businesses doing good, right,
Yeah.
improving people's lives, but aren't businesses geared toward just making money? Putting money in people's pockets, the stockholders' pockets and things like that. So how do you convince or persuade people that they can actually make money or do good and do business?
Yeah, what I'm really focused on now, so after 35 years in industry, I've finally graduated to seek my renaissance, not my retirement. So I'm in my renaissance phase. And that renaissance phase is all about helping companies do three things: become smart, sustainable, and inclusive. And I think that's really how you create competitive advantage. And so let me put it this way. When you think about sustainability, there's kind of three levels of maturity. The lowest level is where a lot of industries operate, which is, what's the minimum I have to do to keep my license to operate and not be thrown in jail and maximize my profitability? On the other end of the spectrum are NGOs, which are like, don't you get it? We just have to do this for our children's children. And those two worlds can't talk to each other. But right in the middle is Humanity-Centric Innovation, which says, let's do this to create competitive advantage. And as soon as you do it to create competitive advantage, you actually achieve all three. You create profitability, and you also do what's right for the planet and people for multiple generations from now. And so I think many people coming out of college want to work for a company that has a purpose bigger than profits. And so I think modern companies today need to optimize purpose, profits, planet, and people. And the companies that do that will create competitive advantage, will attract the greatest talent, and actually be the most successful for the long term. And it's really about creating long-term shareholder value, not just about profitability today.
Gotcha. So again, the TEDxOshkosh vehicle, what made you decide to do this?
Yeah, well, it was, I thought it was a great opportunity. I've always been a huge TED fan and TEDx fan. This whole idea of, really, sharing your idea with others to try to create positive change. And I thought I had a big idea, this idea that we all can become billionaires. If we stop defining a billionaire as somebody who accumulates $1 billion and start defining it as somebody who helps 1 billion people. And I really want to create systems that create a rising tide that lifts all boats, not just yachts. And that's the opportunity. And I really wanted to get that message out, that each and every one of us could be a billionaire. Each and every one of us can help 1 billion people. And it's not just the 8 billion people that live today, but the 6.75 quadrillion people are yet to be born and live on this planet. And so how can we take action today that benefits somebody 7 generations from now? I always want to be that person that plants a tree whose shade I may never enjoy. And it's if all of us do that, I think it's a much better world.
That's great. So let me ask you though, how did you hone your talk into this tight message that you had to present to a live audience, and in front of cameras that are preserved for forever?
Well, I got to tell you, the TEDxOshkosh team was fantastic. One of the things that they did was they had a speaker's workshop. So it wasn't really about what you were going to say, but how you were going to say it, what your body language was, what your presence was on stage, what your dictation was. And I got to tell you, that was a big confidence boost for me. The other thing that they did was they provided a mentor. somebody who had actually been on the stage before that I could talk to and ask, all the different, questions and, just trying to, accolate myself to what was going to happen on stage. And so the other thing the TEDxOshkosh team did was make tremendous recommendations to my presentation. There's one piece in there where I talk about, are we going to create a renaissance or the next dark ages? That came right from the TEDxOshkosh team. Said, hey, why don't you add this? The other aspect was I like slides, as a crutch to do my talk, and I wanted to come with a bunch of slides. And they really challenged me was try to do it with just one slide, or try to do it with no slides. And that was really getting me out of my comfort zone. But I got to tell you, it was so freeing to just stand on the stage and just talk to the audience. And so the TEDxOshkosh team was just fantastic, and they made all the difference in the world.
That's great. And tell us what happened afterwards. I mean, what kind of feedback did you get from people who watched your video on YouTube or watched it live? Did you get feedback?
The feedback has been fantastic, and since I've retired from industry or graduated from industry, I've been on the speaker circuit, and so I've done a number of keynote speeches all around the United States, and primarily talking about how companies can become smart by embedding intelligence into everything they do, and becoming more sustainable by making everything they do more sustainable, and being more inclusive by listening to really all the employees in their company, but more importantly, tapping into capabilities outside their company. I call it radical collaboration, or turning the world into your laboratory to access science and technology better, faster, and cheaper than ever before. And so that's what I'm out there talking about, is trying to encourage companies to embrace this idea of humanity-centric innovation. Because, people always say sustainability is expensive, but I actually think sustainability is free. And the reason I say that is if you can make your products with less mass, less energy, less water, less waste, it's going to actually be cheaper than this linear approach that we use. We need to embrace a circular economy. It's interesting, in nature, one species' waste is another species' food. Why can't we do that in industry, where one industry's waste is another industry's feedstock, and we actually create a true circular economy that would benefit everybody?
Like a biodigester or something like
Absolutely,
that.
Absolutely, yes.
So did your talks, after TEDx, I mean, were some of them, did they come from the TEDx, did they come from your what I'm trying to say, what I'm trying to say?
Like LinkedIn. The people have contacted me through LinkedIn to speak, or just my network. Later this month, I'm going to be speaking to there's 72 chambers in the state of Wisconsin. They're having their annual meeting, and I'm going to be a keynote speaker at the chamber's executive meeting later this month. I'm speaking to the Wisconsin Dairy Products Association. I'm looking to speak at the Wisconsin Economic Development Board next month to talk about these principles of how we can be bolder at an individual level, leader level, company level, state level, societal level, by really embracing humanity-centric innovation.
Your talk was a little over 12 minutes, I think?
Yes.
And then, you must have, have you built on it? I mean, after that initial talk? I mean, it's been a couple of years now?
Yes. What I've been primarily focusing on case studies, people that have actually implemented humanity-centric innovation. Companies like Free Water. This is a company that gives free water away by putting advertisement on the canister of the water that they deliver. So, looking for sustainable business models that really embrace this idea of humanity-centric innovation by solving one of the 17 SDGs, United Nations Sustainability Development Goals, using new business models and exponential technologies.
After you gave your talk, did you find anything that was surprising in your experience with TEDxOshkosh? Or, was there anything that you would have done differently?
Well, I think the one thing I would have done differently is enjoyed it more on stage. I was so focused on preparing for the talk and giving the talk that I didn't really take time to just embrace the moment on stage, and really connect with the audience. I just got out there and did my talk. But the one thing I would have done differently is taken some time to just enjoy the moment.
When you were preparing for your talk, was it longer than the 12 minutes initially? Did you have to pare it down? Did you focus on just giving it like 3 main points from, say, a list of 12, or I don't know?
Yeah, no, it started out longer, and I had slides. I had like a full presentation.
How many slides?
I think I had 26 slides or something crazy like that, because it was like every point I wanted to illuminate that with some type of visualization, And so I went from 26 slides down to, 0 slides. And probably went from about maybe a 25-minute talk. When I give the talk now, it's somewhere between 20 and 40 minutes. Many times it's a 40-minute talk with 20-minute questions. So I really did pare it down to try to get the essence of what I wanted to say. And again, the TEDxOshkosh team really helped me. It was like, hey, 18's all you can do. And I really challenged myself. I wanted to get it down to a 10-minute talk, but 12 minutes is where I ended up.
No, that's great. And those slides.
Yeah.
Is that different? New for you? Or,
yeah, that was outside my comfort zone. I typically like a slide as a crutch, that kind of helps me pace and reminds me of what I'm going to say, versus just, you're just up there on the stage and you're telling your story.
That's awesome. So, in your bio, you are described as a corporate futurist. Well, what exactly is that?
Yeah, when I think of a corporate futurist, I always like this quote that the best way to predict the future is to create it. And so what a corporate futurist does is create a preferable future. It's not about coming up with possible futures or probable futures or predicting the future. It's about coming up with a methodology, a plan, an action to actually create a preferable future. And so as a corporate futurist, my job was, when I worked at Kimberly-Clark as the chief scientist, was to think about where Kimberly-Clark needed to be in the next 5 years, 10 years. I like to think 50 years. Where was Kimberly-Clark going to be 50 years from now? And how do we put the action plans in place today to put us on a trajectory that was consistent with that future? And so that's what a corporate futurist does.
Wow. That must be hard for business people to adapt to, or maybe even understand when they're just thinking about their next dividend check, or.
Yeah, and you can't have everybody in the company being a futurist. I like the Google model of 70-20-10. 70% of everything you do in a business should be focused on the existing business. 20% should be focused on adjacencies, and 10% should be focused on breakthrough. And maybe 1% of that 10% should be a futurist who is really thinking about really breakthrough ideas on where the company could go, or where the enterprise could go, or where the country could go. But I think we need individuals that are not just thinking about the future, but creating a probable future and making that future a reality.
The idea of being a billionaire, you mentioned that, people think about it as accumulation of wealth, great wealth. And seriously, when I saw your title, I'm like, wow, how do you redefine this idea of being a billionaire? And that must be a challenge for you too. In trying to convince people that, we should not be pursuing the almighty dollar.
Right. Well, the other thing is they're not mutually exclusive, right? If you help 1 billion people, there's probably a lot of wealth that can be created at that. But that isn't the objective function. The objective function is to make people's lives better, and to really focus on this idea of making the planet better. And by doing so, I believe wealth is created as well. But, just going after wealth, it's like trying to play tennis with your eyes on the scoreboard. You can't do it. You got to focus on the ball. And the ball in this case is humanity-centric innovation. And if you focus on the ball, the scoreboard will take care of itself. But if you just focus on the scoreboard, you're going to lose the game.
You mentioned one example of the free water. Can you give me a couple more examples about the human-centric innovations?
Yeah, there's a number of examples. One of the companies, I used to be a part of the Toilet Board Coalition. So the Toilet Board Coalition was an entity that was created by Kimberly-Clark, Unilever, Lixil, and Firmenich to really help foster local entrepreneurs to solve the global sanitation crisis. And so one of the companies that I worked with was SatSense in India. And what SatSense was doing was collecting satellite data from the European Space Agency and then using that data to help companies understand where their watersheds were, what the source of quality of the water that was coming in their plant, how much pollution was going out of their plant. So this is an example of using science and technology like satellite technology to help companies reduce their pollution. And so that's another example of what I would call humanity-centric innovation.
So what is on your plate now? I mean, what are your goals now?
Yeah, my goal today is to help as many companies as I can embrace this idea of humanity-centric innovation. So I'm actually working through 3 different consulting companies. I work with a consulting company in India, one that's in England, another one here that's in Wisconsin. But through that, I access their clients who are interested in sustainability and how to create sustainable business models. And hopefully I'm having an impact that way. I'm also speaking, I'm also writing. I'm actually writing a book on humanity-centric innovation. I haven't figured out the title yet, but it's this roadmap to create humanity-centric innovations at every organizational level.
Is there such a thing for an individual? Like, how can I be a billionaire?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the best ways to become a billionaire is to find a problem that you're really passionate about. And then not just sit back and worry about it, but begin to take action. And what I mean by that is, there's this idea of 6 degrees of separation. We're 6 degrees separated from every person on earth. But what I found in the business world, it's 3 degrees of separation. Pick up the phone, use your LinkedIn, connect with somebody who else is passionate about that, somebody who has a business model or somebody who has a technology, and start working together to create a business that improves people's lives and creates, there's nothing wrong with creating wealth for yourself. I mean, we need to have businesses that are profitable, but also focused on purpose, people, and planet.
Awesome. And, thank you so much for letting us know that becoming a billionaire is within each of our reach, and we can all become billionaires. And thank you for joining us on this episode of TEDxOshkosh TV. Until next time, this is Grace Lim.
Visit TEDxOshkosh.com to view the complete talks of all past TEDxOshkosh speakers, as well as more episodes of TEDxOshkosh TV.